Parachuting Hamsters and Andy Russell, Chapter 5. Remember in Chapter 4, he wanted to go home with his dad, but when he ran out there, he was already gone. And then, remember they had to wait for Tamika's uncle to be home before they went out to dinner, but the aunt gave them some tasty little cakes, like fancy cookies kind of cakes with yumminess on the inside. And then Tamika was going to read, and Andy was trying to be a detective by figuring out where the hamsters had come from. And his clues were he wrote that the person lives up high in the building, has fancy colored handkerchiefs, and is good at tying tiny knots. So those are his clues. So Chapter 5 are cashews are nuts. Andy and Tamika rode the elevator down to the lobby. Then Stephanie took them down the back stairs to Tom's office so they could visit the hamsters. Tom's office was in the underground garage just opposite the stairwell. His work table was cluttered with papers, boxes, a toaster, and other small appliances. There was a broken baby carriage by his table, a tricycle, and a few wooden boxes. Tom had his toolbox open. He was fixing a lamp. The white Zinfandel box was on the floor by Tom's desk. Andy looked in. The hamsters were running in small circles and climbing over one another. Andy held out the palm of his hand and pretended it was a pad. He pretended his pointer finger on his other hand was a pen. Andy introduced himself to the hamsters. He's like writing on his hand. "I'm Detective Russell," he said. "So, who tied the handkerchiefs to your feet? Who threw you out the window?" Tom stopped working on the lamp and looked at Andy and Tamika. At Andy. Tamika looked too. The hamster didn't respond. "So you won't talk?" Andy said. "How can I help you if you don't answer my questions?" He waited. The hamster still didn't respond. "Well," Andy said, "there are ways to make you talk." "There are?" Tom asked. "I'd like to hear these hamsters talk." Andy pursed his lips. "We're crowded in here," he said with his lips still together. Tom looked at Andy. "We're crowded," Andy said again without moving his lips. Oh, we're crowded. He's trying to say that the hamsters said that. Tamika pointed at Andy and said, "Cashews." "Cashews?" Tom said. "Cashews are nuts." "Well," Tamika asked, "what do you think Andy is?" "I was just practicing being a ventriloquist," Andy said, "and I was saying they're crowded in there. We need another box so that we can split them up." So he was pretending like he was one of the hamsters talking. A ventriloquist is when you keep your, if you're a ventriloquist, you don't move your lips very much, but you have like a doll over here that's moving its lips. You make its mouth move and you talk for it. "Hi there, how are you?" Like that, okay? "No," Tamika said, "if we split them up, we might be taking hamster children from their parents. I'm sure they'd rather be with their parents in a crowded box than be separated from them." Andy thought about Tamika being away from her parents while they were in the rehabilitation center. He understood why she didn't want Tom to break up the hamster families. Tom said, "After I fix this lamp, I'll look for a bigger box." Andy and Tamika watched Tom fix the lamp. He split apart one end of the cord, peeled away plastic coating from the end of the wire, and attached a plug. He pulled the other end of, oh, here's a picture of them in the box. He pulled the wire through the lamp and attached the bulb, socket, and switch. He screwed in the bulb. Then he plugged in the lamp and turned on the switch. The light went on. He turned the lamp off and on a few times. "Fixed," Tom declared. 14B will be pleased." 14B? Andy asked. "What kind of a name is that?" "It's not a name," Tom explained. "It's an apartment number. I know everyone in this building by his or her apartment. To me, Tamika's aunt and uncle are Mr. and Mrs. 18A. The door to the stairwell opened. Mr. Russell stepped out. He was carrying a large bag. "I have a bowl, hamster food, and a water bottle," he said. "Hey, Dad," Andy said. "That's great." He filled the bowl with food and put it in the wooden box. Then, while Tamika was setting up the water bottle, Andy told his father, I plan to find out who threw out the hamsters, and when I do, I'll ask what he, or maybe she, thinks it would feel like to be tied to a handkerchief and thrown out a window. Mr. Russell told Andy, just don't get into any trouble. Me? Andy said, pretending to be shocked. Do I ever get in trouble? Yes, all the time, Mr. Russell said. Just don't get into trouble here. Okay, Dad. Andy and Tamika watched as the hamsters stretched up and drank from the water bottle. Another went to the food bowl and ate. I hope you like your meal, Andy said to the hamsters. You really love animals, Tom said to Andy. Do you want to take these home with you? Andy looked at his dad. Mr. Russell shook his head. Tamika told Tom, he already has a snake, gerbils, and a goldfish. That's a lot of pets in one house. It sure is, Tom said. Tamika looked at her watch. It's almost 6 o'clock. We have to go now, she said. My aunt might be waiting for us. And I have to get home, Mr. Russell said. Tamika, Andy, and Mr. Russell went back up the stairs to the lobby. Andy told his father, I'm giving Aunt Mandy Land a try, and so far it's not so bad. Good, Mr. Russell said. Andy and Tamika said goodbye again to Mr. Russell, and the two of them got on the elevator. Tamika pressed the 18 button. Just as the doors started to close, someone wedged his briefcase between them. The doors opened, and a tall man in a dark suit stepped into the elevator with his large leather briefcase. Hey, look at you. Look at pretty you, the man said. He dropped his briefcase, grabbed Tamika, and lifted her into the air. Tamika's head almost hit the ceiling of the elevator. She looked down, smiling nervously. Hi, Uncle Terrence. And who is this fine-looking young man? Uncle Terrence asked as he put Tamika down. Is this your friend Andy? Yes, Tamika answered. That's me, Andy said, and stepped back. He didn't want Tamika's uncle to pick him up. Andy stuck out his hand to shake and said, Hello, Mr. Taylor, I'm happy to meet you. It's Uncle Terrence, Tamika's uncle said as he grabbed Andy's hand. And I'm happy to meet you too. He squeezed Andy's hand and shook it. Hey, Andy said, you and Aunt Mandy squeeze and hug real hard. We do? Uncle Terrence asked. Andy wiggled his fingers. They all still worked. It's okay, he told Uncle Terrence. You just got me by surprise. Andy put his hand in his pocket. He didn't want anyone else in the city to get him by surprise. Did Mandy tell you where we're eating dinner? Uncle Terrence asked. It's a wonderful little French restaurant with a great poulet au poivre vert, and even better, creamy sweet pastries. Poule per what? Andy asked. It's chicken with green peppers, and it's great. Uncle Terrence explained just as the elevator doors opened. Here we are, home sweet home. As soon as they had entered the apartment, Aunt Mandy said, we're late, and rushed everyone to the elevator again. You must be real hungry, Andy said to Aunt Mandy once they were in the elevator. It's not that, Aunt Mandy explained. It's just not polite to be late when you have reservations. There sure are a lot of polite rules, Andy said. Aunt Mandy smiled and said, Yes, I guess there are. Dun, dun, dun.